You're listening to the Fusion Patrol podcast. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Fusion Patrol. I'm Eugene.
And I'm Ben.
And this is our take on Doomwatch, Tomorrow the Rat. This is the, I believe, fourth episode of Doomwatch.
The fourth episode.
Whereas episodes 2 and 3 are
Lost,
perhaps, probably forever.
sad.
It is sad. And so this episode deals with genetically modified rats. And I think I briefly may have mentioned that I think, probably done in a poorer way, but I suspect the new Planet of the Apes movie is this story.
After seeing this one, I would agree.
So what'd you think of the episode?
Like I did with the first one, I enjoyed this one a great deal. It's interesting who the villain keeps changing, and I'll comment a little bit on that later. But it was also a little creepy, tiny bit creepy. There was that nice little psychological drama in there, off-screen killings, especially that of a child. I mean, or off-screen maulings, I should say. I mean, it's disturbing, especially if you don't like rats.
Yeah, well, who does? But
I don't mind. I mean, I'm not going to exactly go pick up a sewer rat, but I'm not terrified of them.
I'm not terrified of them, but I certainly wouldn't want one as a pet, and I certainly
wouldn't want a sewer rat. No,
and I certainly wouldn't want to see an intelligent carnivorous one come out of my toilet.
No, or be able to use tools.
Tools, yes. Well, anyway, the story opens up with a series of rat attacks. And Quist's people are on the job thinking that there's perhaps something up, but they can't find anything. You know, a rat is omnivorous, but there's a great debate going on. This is like, yeah, they're omnivorous, but they would much prefer carbohydrates and vegetable matter, and they only turn towards meat as sort of a secondary food supply, and certainly not attacking human beings.
Unless threatened. That's the argument in this episode.
But nonetheless, the attacks are happening, and our heroes go off and try to trap one of the carnivorous rats. And that's really the first sign we get something wrong. They put a rat trap out in a house where they had an attack on a child. They bait it with meat. They leave the kitchen behind and they go out and they listen as they hear rat noises.
Oh, the rat noises at an unbelievable decibel.
And then they run into the room and they find that not only have the rats not been trapped, they have taken the bait and they've used forks and spoons as tools, which they've either brought with them or gotten out of the drawers to prop the trap open so that they won't get trapped. And which, frightens Toby quite a bit, but even more so when the rats go on the attack and attack him and the computer guy whose name eludes me at the moment.
Can't remember.
Yeah, it's computer guy. The guy that actually runs the Doomwatch.
He runs the Doomwatch computer.
Yeah. That, okay, a little bit fake with a rat, but very, very effective and very scary. I mean, the implication of the tool-using rat starts off, this is a good premise.
Mm-hmm.
We also meet Dr. Mary Bryant. And this is, I'd call the whole Dr. Bryant as sort of almost a subplot, wouldn't you? I mean, there's an awful lot about her being a woman scientist and not being particularly feminine. And I don't mean that in a lesbian.
No, she struck me. Of course, this we're talking 1970. She had a lot of that feminist liberation thing kind of going. I mean, like she would go to a bar and I mean, she had this line. You know how the joke is a man will come sit next to a woman and he'll have a pickup line, or a chat up line. And she had a brush off line, and that is,
I'm
I
not a
am not a
whore.
whore.
And although I appreciate male companionship, if I were looking, you would not be.
You would not be it. And it's like clearly this is a script because she first says it to this old guy, and then later John from Doomwatch, he's been assigned to chat her up, and she starts throwing it out right to him
Before she
immediately,
even
word
looks
for
at
word.
him. Before
No,
she even looks at him. And I thought that was interesting that Quist sends Lodge up to sleep with her. I mean, that's exactly what he does. He just go. She's pneumatic, in the words of Huxley, I believe, as he put it, and I'd call her nubile.
Yeah.
And that's your homework.
And of course, John. That's a very funny scene where Quist comes into the room and he hears John on the phone talking to who is to be the girlfriend of the day,
Yeah.
and he says, I don't begrudge my team having a sexual life, but you are insatiable. Yours is insatiable, and it's nervous energy.
Yeah. So he says, well, let's put your nervous energy on this doctor and go chat her up. Yep. And so he does, amongst other things, with her before he reveals who she is. And she's working for another ministry, or perhaps the same ministry.
It's never really made clear. I wasn't sure if it was a ministry. I wasn't sure if it was just another just a scientific think group or something.
It's the rodent eradication branch of the ministry.
Okay.
And I think it's the same minister who oversees Quist. So I think it's the same ministry, but
well, ooh, boy,
hard to say.
Hard to tell.
The way they are, they purposely don't mention any ministries, so they don't mention any ministers. There's another plot going on in here, and that's commentary on the mid-1960s, I guess it was, Cruel Poisons Act, which apparently outlawed cruel poisons when used for eradicating animals like rats. And there's even at one point, there's some commentary in a newspaper article about how people were making the commentary, is that only in a country like Britain, where we love animals more than we love children, would we pass a law like this? Because the rat eradication people are having trouble. The rats are getting resistant to the poisons. It's a real problem, and so the solution stems out here that the rat eradication branch has semi-officially approved kind of the research of this Dr. Bryant, who is working on cannibalistic rats.
She's a geneticist.
And geneticist not in what we consider the modern sense of geneticist of manipulating genes, but in the eugenicist.
Yeah, more like eugenics.
Breeding, husbandry and whatnot. Or at least it seems like that's what she's talking about, because I certainly don't think they really had any, she's certainly not in her house doing any particularly deep gene manipulation and gene therapy.
It was more behavioral.
Behavioral modification, and she's breeding these rats to basically be released, and she is releasing these rats to go out and eat the other rats in an area. It's a rat-on-rat war, and they've been conditioned to not like human flesh, supposedly. And of course, they've also, like in Jurassic Park, they've been conditioned to be
sterilized.
They've been sterilized. They're not conditioned to be sterilized. And we show this male rat a picture of a female rat and then give him a shock.
And it's a little tiny electric doll.
Yeah. Only this big. Anyway. So, of course, all their protections are in place. But in any story like this, and they even call her Frankenstein in this one by name.
Boy, there is absolutely nothing covert about this storyline, is there?
No, there isn't. There's nothing cool, and of course the rats get out, and guess what? They escape.
Hilarity ensues.
Hilarity ensues as they go on the rampage, and they're up to the point where they're killing horses. They can take down a full-grown horse. They're taking out people. They're eating children. They're getting close to driving cars. It looks like in a couple of instances. Not quite, but they are beginning.
Well, I was expecting at one point for them to actually, stand on top of another and ring doorbells in order to get in. I mean, I was waiting for that to happen.
Okay, to be fair, when we were watching, there's a scene at the end where the mother of a dead child comes to the door.
That's what I thought.
And Irene goes, "It's a rat. Just learn to ring the doorbell."
I thought the very same thing when I was watching it, that the rats had somehow figured out to ring the doorbell and they were going to attack their creator.
Land shark.
Yeah.
Turned out it wasn't, but nonetheless, yeah. So the scientist. I'm losing my train of thought here, but the scientist. They even have this long pillow talk discussion with Ridge about how she has her sexual needs that need to be scratched, but she's not romantic, and that's not very scientist of her. And there's some sort of...
Well, there was I kind of got the feeling that when they were writing this, of course, being this is the fourth episode of the series, at least aired. I'm not sure what the order these were written in, but I get the feeling that when they were doing this episode, that is here you've got the character of Ridge, who's just this big sex animal. I mean, he has total Lothario, and now they've given this. I kind of got the feeling maybe they decided to craft the character of Dr. Bryant to be sort of like a female counterpart, because the dialogue that was going on between these two, it was like verbal fencing as to with just the way that they were trying to.
Yeah,
I mean, they weren't being romantic in their talk.
No, and
in the slightest.
And Ridge was pouring it on. I mean, he was pouring on all his stuff for, picking up birds or pulling a bird. Sorry, get my terminology right. And she was falling for it, but she wasn't falling for it because she was falling for it. She was falling for it because she appreciated.
She recognized what he was doing.
She recognized how good he was doing it.
Yeah.
And she told him as much. And it really was probably the point where he told her that he'd read her research paper that put it over the top. So because she does say after they've had their little, one of their little flingy things, she says to him, the only sexual intercourse isn't the only kind of intercourse I require to be satisfied, or something like that, when she wants him to actually talk intelligently about something. It's all very... There's that whole dynamic going on, and there's also the whole dynamic going on between her and her boss. Her boss is teaching her a lesson in political expediency. Her boss is the head of the rat eradication department. They've gone and pitched to the minister their idea of these rats. The minister thinks it's a great idea. Now that there's a little bit of a problem, the head of the branch is like, it works like this. If it goes well, the minister takes the credit. If it goes badly, it's my head and your head on the block. And he's manipulating this. He's protecting her, because even when it goes completely wrong, she's like, are you sacking me? No, I want you to resign. Well,
but I will not accept.
But I won't accept it. I'm going to transfer you to another branch, and then we've done basically due diligence with regards to it. And then you'll just go back to doing your work anyway.
Yeah, she's going to continue with the research anyway, so big deal.
Yeah. And of course, the research was done in her house as a cost-saving measure, but in reality, it's, so that the minister is blameless. And they're having this dialogue about, how scientists shouldn't feel guilty, and your reaction to this problem is emotional, not
So this is the other
scientific.
side of this is the other side of the Mary Shelley Frankenstein argument, that it's, that the ends justify the means.
Yeah, and it's rather heavy-handed, and there's also some relatively heavy-handed discussion of the nature of God at some point. I mean, both Ridge and Quist, in discussions with Mary, bring up that part of the equation. Maybe with all this you'll finally see the face of God, or you'll finally, and I forgot what Ridge's commentary was, but in both cases she just simply dismissed it out of hand. But it was an interesting bit of odd moralizing, because I'm not sure that they were talking about God in a literal sense, but in Einstein's sense,
Well, I
God
think
does not play dice kind of thing. But
they were
hard to
also
say.
talking about. I think Bridge was making a reference to the evolution of humankind as well, maybe elevating them to the level of God, things like that. So there was a lot of moralizing going.
And Hitler too.
Yeah,
because there was the whole comparison of, that was it. She was talking about God's creation or something of that nature, and she said, I think a God that would allow babies to be born deformed isn't a God, or isn't much of a God, or something of that nature. In her discussion of why she was really doing this with a rat, she was trying to find a way to breed rats so that she could eliminate the imperfections. And then Lidge is, are you talking about doing this then with humans? Well, yes. And so, well, where do you stop? Hitler had the same
idea. Just in a different execution.
And she comes back and says, well, that's not a scientific viewpoint or something of that nature. And
but that's where the bit of the God moralizing came in again.
Right. That was the point. So there's a lot of that going on in that.
But I think you wouldn't have Doomwatch if there wasn't some kind of moralizing.
Right. I think that's definitely. I mean, we said this last time. We'll say it again. The premise of this show. This is a Kit Pedler, Jerry Davis creation, and they were always very heavy-handed in their. I don't exactly want to say anti-science moralizing, but that's the simplest way to pigeonhole it. They say,
right.
It's like science is going to screw stuff up, and therefore,
at the very least,
what goes wrong.
At the very least, they're talking about scientific responsibility and accountability. And unfortunately, every time, well, I shouldn't say every time, but so far in these 2 episodes that we've seen, whoever is the bad guy, the bad scientific team or government that is that Doomwatch is investigating, they have absolutely no accountability and no sense of responsibility whatsoever. So,
one last thing about the female scientist. I thought there was an interesting sign of the times when the parents of one of the kids who'd been attacked.
Yes. My God.
Parents were reading. The kid wasn't dead yet at this point. The kid had been attacked. He was one of the earliest attacked. And when it was found out that Mary Bryant was the person who'd released the rats, there were some interviews with her. And they were reading a newspaper article, and it says something like, Mary Bryant, an attractive 32-year-old scientist, and says that the Cruel Poisons Act is, typical of a country that likes. But it's like, who would start off a newspaper article and call a person an attractive 32-year-old scientist? It was so condescendingly sexist.
Well, then they take it a step further when the father, when he shows his wife, he says, "Isn't this the lady that was talking to you right after the attack?" He says, and he reads a bit of the article and he says, "Is she out of her tiny Chinese mind?"
Oh yeah. Well, that's yeah,
It's like, wow.
yeah. But I believe there's a number of the British have a number of phrases about the Chinese that are derogatory in the old days. I don't know that they're not meant. I don't know that they're specifically meant. Well, heck, they're racist comments, but I don't think they're meant Chinese in that respect. They've got something because the Chinese are different. I think that's it. I mean, for example, in cricket, they have a left arm Chinaman is a type of a bowler, and it's a bowler who bowls basically backwards. He does it the reverse of everyone else. They do it the wrong way, and I think that's where that comes from. In the same.
So is she out of her tiny backwards mind? Is what they were basically saying.
Twisted. Yeah, sort of different, not normal, not right mind. Yeah.
It's still very derogatory.
It was very 1970s British. Can't think of the guy's name from Till Death Us Do Part, but I should know it. The guy who's the precursor to Archie Bunker over here. Anyhow, yeah, that's it about her. She has her little sexual things, and she has her plans to make the world better, and she has her scientific detachment, and she has her concern. She doesn't want to feel guilty because guilt is not scientific. It's funny, they never use logical.
No, they don't.
Not once do they ever use the word logical when that's the appropriate word in context, but they always call it scientific. And I thought that was driving it home a little too hard there, perhaps, but...
Sign of the times, maybe.
Oh, yeah, and the rats were trained not to like human flesh, she thought. And she actually developed this little clever bunker that keeps the rats hidden and it keeps the rats locked up in this cement room and a vault behind it. And then there's they don't like being watched, so she has this device that monitors when they take food from the different
feed tray or something.
Trays, so she knows which ones they're going from, and they never take the food out of the human flesh tray because it never registers anyone or any of the rats ever. And they go in and they're not sterilized. So Ridge has worked because they find out that the rats in the wild are not sterilized. So they must have gotten out of there. No, they didn't. They go in and investigate the room, and they discover that this little pressure plate, not only have the rats chewed a hole behind the human flesh to get out, but they've developed the lever so that they could lift the pressure plate and slide nails under it so that it wouldn't register them stepping on it.
Right.
So that she was oblivious to the fact that they had their own path in and out of the thing. And apparently they were, coming along and giving a little performance once in a while so that she wouldn't know they'd escaped. So terribly ratus sapiens.
Ratus sapiens, as Tobias called them.
As he was practically fainting. That was an interesting bit when the rats attacked him and he was...
Oh, he grabs a rat. It attacks him on the leg. I love it. He grabs a rat and he just bangs the snot out of this thing on the dining room table. And it was... I had to stop and laugh. It looked
fake.
Obviously I knew that it was fake. It looked kind of fake, and it was a little shocking, but in a somewhat it almost had a Python quality, Monty Python kind of quality to it, in its gratuitous violence against animals.
Well, it's a rat, and it's an attacking rat, but I thought it was funny is that he and the computer guy are being attacked by the rats, and we later learn it's because they're literally attacking them because they had attempted to trap them. This is just this is pure attack back against someone who has attacked them.
Which is something that Ridge had been saying all along. He says, no, they'll only attack if they're feeling threatened.
Right, but if they're smart enough, they can perceive a threat where you wouldn't as an animal necessarily. You You can perceive a threat as being something that somebody is going to do to you, like humans are going to try to kill me, therefore he's a threat. And but I thought when Tobias is after he's beat the rat up and then he's, he just kind of slumps over on the table. And the other guy grabs some scotch and he's like, unclench your teeth, drink this.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Toby was really, really clenched on that. And then they look around and the dead rats are missing. And they're like, I killed that rat. And the other goes, I killed one too. They're gone. And I bet
apparently they ferried their dead away.
Said, and I bet they didn't take them to be buried. So I assume that means they're going to eat them. Yeah. I think the first time I watched it, I think I thought he said, because the audio is not great on this in places in particular. I thought he said something about the effect. I think they took it off to bury them, but he said, and I bet they didn't take them off to bury them. So different meaning altogether. Actually, it's more scary if they can take them off and bury them, in my opinion. But
yeah, that's pretty advanced thinking.
Yeah, and so it turns out they're not at all averse to human flesh, but what they really like is human blood. They're like sharks. They get excited when they smell blood, and Toby keeps getting bit, and I hope they don't have rabies and stuff. Ultimately, Quist, the weird thing is, like, the scientist guy or the head guy at the branch of the rats, they're not trying to cover this up. They are politically just maneuvering this, if not to their advantage, then to their, the best that they can do. So
it's total spin control.
It's total spin control. And when it's revealed that that's what it is, and Quist says, we have to do X, Y, and Z. The guy at the branch says, yep, I agree. We have to do X, Y, and Z. He's right. Which basically amounts to suspending the Cruel Poisons Act, which will not only go after the rats in massive mobilization to kill off the rats in London and elsewhere, but also is going to have enormous collateral damage on domestic animals and livestock, because there's going to be some death killover, but they can't afford to have these.
They can't let these rats run loose.
And they go down.
Because they discover at some point, when they go into the sewers, they discover that they've developed a hive mentality.
They're making nests in hives. They've got classes, and they're domesticating mice.
Yes. Or they're behaving more like bees or ants than they are like rats at this point.
Yeah. So it's, yeah. So they go after him, and the end of the story is hopeful, but, well, hopeful in terms of the rats, but, we've never won the war against rats yet. So the likelihood of permanently eradicating them seems unlikely, but, Quist is like, we're doing really well. I think we're going to have a rat day once a month, though, from now on, where they go in. And I mean, they're poisoning them in the millions, pouring poisons and gas into the sewers. And
we see dead rat carcasses all over the place. And of course, the question runs through my mind is, who's going to clean that up?
It just flushes out into the Thames.
Oh, okay, sure. That's healthy.
Every once in a while. Oh, well, if you knew what used to go down the Thames, a few rat carcasses is nothing. In fact, I felt very disappointed, frankly, when I visited London.
That you didn't see things floating down the Thames?
That I didn't see him dragging a body out of the Thames.
Oh, dear.
You ever see a British show, they've always got the barge out there and they're pulling the waterlogged, got the hooks out.
You just haven't been on the right spot.
I was down there by the London Eye. I figured that would be Parliament. I mean, if it's not by Parliament, where else are you going to find him pulling a dead body out of the Thames?
But, too much attention, too much, too many witnesses. No, you gotta go where it's a little less populated. Then you'll find dead bodies there, I'm sure.
Well, it was still just not what I expected, and to their credit, I guess they keep that away from the tourists. But so I guess the last thing we should say about the story is that our villainess. Well, you'll talk about that in a little bit.
Yeah.
Mary, in the end, the mother of the woman whose child one of the children. The kid that got attacked and was reading, the parents who were reading the paper, the child is later turned around and killed by the rats. So she's upset and she comes to her house, and because she just lives down the street, and rings on the doorbell, and she casts some nasty stare on it, and she just spits all over her, and definitely a python. It's a python spitting fest there,
Yeah.
and goes after her with a knife,
a really big knife too.
Yeah, and she does manage to cut her arm up a bit, and she's bleeding.
Oh, she slices her arm up very nicely.
And anyway, the mom leaves, and Rat Lady
she's bait.
That was the last we really see of her. Ridge is coming over for dinner, dressed up as James Bond, and he comes over, finds her door open, goes in, lights off, turns them on, and finds her rat-eaten carcass back in the lab. And so endeth the story. The Frankenstein is killed by her own creation, and the hammer smacks us on the head just one more time. So you wanted to say something about the changing nature of the villain in this story.
Oh, well, basically, I wasn't quite sure as to what this entity was that Mary Bryant was working for. I couldn't tell if it was government. I wasn't sure if it was a scientific team. It wasn't very clear to me. Granted, I was multitasking at the time that I was watching it, so I'm sure there might have been a detail here or there that I was missing. But one of the things that I kind of got a sense of is that with Doomwatch, it seems like that every episode they are fighting up against the establishment, whoever that establishment might be. One week it could be government. One week it could be a bunch of amoral scientists, whatever it is. The identity of that establishment could very well change from episode to episode. But that was the only thing that I really just noticed, is that the enemies change in terms of what kind of organization they might be. At least that was something I noticed.
That's an interesting point, because, of course, for the context of the show, we've only watched the 2 episodes, and in the first one, it was government-funded research into plastic disposal, and in this one, it's government efforts to control rats. I don't remember.
You've seen all of them, haven't you?
I've seen all of them, and all that there are, and I don't remember if it's consistently got. No, it's not, because there's the one with the battery chickens. That one is definitely a private firm. So yeah, no, it's not. But I think a lot of research is government funded, and
well, being that it's Britain, I can understand that.
And I think the parallel with the atomic bomb is still there. And that's, government employing science for
their own
purposes. One could argue that and I think it'd be a reasonable argument, one could argue that the people working on the atomic weapon for government were working towards what was considered to be a good and just purpose.
Well, I'm sure they thought that at the time they were making it.
Well, I'm positive they were, and morality is a function of the time you live in, not a function of the time you reflect upon it. So, it's not for us to judge the worst of 2 evils, being taken over and beaten in a war, possibly, or marshaling your efforts into something that is new and very powerful, but also has some very real ramifications. Because even at the time they were making the atomic bomb, they knew that there were ramifications for atomic power and better understanding the physics of the universe. So I kind of think that Doomwatch is out of touch because it reflects an alternate, it may be reflecting an alternate morality to the prevailing spirit of the times. It's kind of
Well,
hard to say.
one thing that clearly is separating it is, granted, as I said, we've only seen 2 episodes so far, but in both, well, especially in the first one, but we kinda get a little bit of a sense of it in this the second episode too, and that is the party responsible for science having run amok, in this case, intelligent carnivorous rats, act without any sense of responsibility, or, I mean, I hate to use the word morality.
But Ridge puts that to Mary Bryant at every level. It's like, carnivorous rats, you didn't think they'd be eating people. Oh, I'm not that irresponsible. They've been trained not to eat human flesh. I did this, I did this, I did this. The rats will not eat. They are not at all interested in human flesh. I'm not. And he says, well, but, then they breed and they haven't had the conditioning. She says,
No, they can't be. The ones that are free
I'm
are
not that
sterile.
irresponsible.
Right.
Again, I'm not that irresponsible. I thought of that. They're sterile. And so, she's not doing it without considering the consequences.
She's not. I mean, that's why I don't want to necessarily cast her as the villain, even though she at times has this very, very tough exterior that she likes to project. I'm not necessarily casting her as the villain, more her boss.
I don't think her boss was, I think her boss took her word for it. Said, well, I'm adequately preparing for this contingency.
But I think he was only doing that to save his hide. He wasn't doing it because it was the right thing to do.
Maybe.
I mean, that was the impression that I got. I mean, especially when he says later on, you're going to resign. I will not accept your resignation. I'm going to transfer you. So he really didn't give, pardon the expression, a rat's ass as to the morality of the situation. He was just thinking about the research and anything else be damned.
Well, she didn't do wrong in his mind. She did what they were supposed to do, and an accident happened. And it comes back to that Cruel Poisons Act in this. At one point, he and Quist have a little discussion about, tell me your problem. And he says, well, rats do 65 billion pounds of damage every. No. Tell me about your problem. My problem is the Cruel and Poisons Act of 1967, which doesn't allow me to use this, and this. And we have all this problem. And Quist says, and then you've got this poison, but I guess the rats are getting resistant. Exactly. Have you developed your system for sterilizing the rats or, for contraceptive of the rats? And he says, that research hasn't gotten far enough along yet. And then Quist says, and then of course you'll have the religious objection for that. Or you may have a religious objection to contraception of rats. And the head of the thing says, yes, we most certainly will. And, so, I mean, we are presented with a man here who has a problem. And the problem is rats, and that's his job. And you can see from this little snippet of dialogue that they're exploring every avenue they can, and many of them are blocked. I can't use the poisons that are effective. The ineffective poisons are getting less effective. We don't have the technology to sterilize the rats, and even if we did, there'll be somebody coming in and blocking it on religious grounds. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. So, I don't want to, he's obviously politically a spin doctor, but I don't want to cast him even necessarily in a completely bad light because he's trying to do an important job.
Well, not nearly as bad as what we saw with the minister in the Plastic Eaters.
Right. Not nearly so much. I mean, this is probably, should have had more controls on how they experimented, releasing 25 at a time, a month apart, to see how it goes.
Irresponsible.
Is irresponsible. Do they wipe out some rats? We don't know. So, story written by I think produced by and directed by Terrence Dudley.
Well, let me see. The story was written by Jerry Davis, but it was directed by Terrence Dudley.
And I thought he did the writing too.
No, not according to the, well, I went
At
to
the
the
end-
ever popular IMDb.
At the end credits, it says Tomorrow the Rat by Terrence Dudley, but I didn't think he was a writer. So I looked up online. I didn't look on IMDb. Not because I hate IMDb, as has been previously accused of me on Fusion Patrol, but just simply because I was looking like on Doomwatch pages and stuff. And I sent references that said, he was the producer, references said he was the director, and a couple of references.
Creator of sorts.
Jerry Davis and Kip Pedler. And then I saw one that said, like, two places where they said he was doing triple duty as scriptwriter and thing.
It says series devised. Oh, Jerry Davis. And then, I see. In parentheses, after that, it says series devised by. And then Terrence Dudley after that. So it's a badly put together profile.
Credits. And Terrence Dudley was I guess, producer, and for many shows, he's done some Doctor Who. I worked on Doctor Who, not as a producer, but I forgot what he was, the director. I think he wrote King's Demons in a couple of episodes right about that period of time.
Oh, really?
Peter Davison era. I think he did 3 stories and was producer on Blake 7 for a while.
What era?
Of Blake 7?
Yeah, like roughly. Just curiosity.
I don't know. I don't know. There was only the 4 years, so.
Was it the Blake years or was it the Avon years? I'm guessing.
I don't know. I guess we could try to find out.
The Servalan years or the Sleer years?
It's the Sleer years. I don't know who did it at the end there. Terrence Dudley. Oh, and he also worked on the Survivors. Yeah, he wrote 3 scripts: 4 to Doomsday, Black Orchid, and The King's Demons.
Okay, well,
he directed Meglos.
Oh my God, what a piece of garbage.
He took over after David Maloney as producer, and he was reassigned before it was known there'd be a 4th season. So he obviously did probably the 3rd year. 2nd or 3rd year. Or maybe 2nd and 3rd year. And he also wrote the script of Dun Dun Dun, Canine and Company.
That wasn't that bad.
Actually, that wasn't that bad. That was kind of a.
Was it strong? I mean, what I don't go off to a tangent, but not strong enough to start a series. But it wasn't that bad for a standalone. And as far as his Doctor Who stuff, I mean, okay, Meglos, garbage.
Well, he didn't write that, but
no, but he directed it. Black Orchid I liked, but 4 to Doomsday, yikes.
Four to Doomsday is a mess. I will agree. King's Demons is marred, unfortunately, by the presence of the Master. And I hate to say that because I love the Master, but that was
it was not a good episode for him.
That was when Anthony Ainley was in full panto mode and come my demons. Oh. Hey, he was doing the French guy in that one. Oh, that was the French Knight. Oh yeah. So
yeah,
but yeah,
so
actually Canine Company, I'm gonna put a plug in for Canine Company. It's got it's about a tin dog, and that's never good. But I liked Canine and Company because in a time when Doctor Who had become the John Nathan Turner plastic and metal railings and sterile looking wherever they went. Even when they went to places like State of Decay, everything looked clean and even though it was dirty. I mean, there's just that crisp, unrealistic. Canine and Company still had that film. Did I say film? Yes. Feel, and
it felt gritty.
It had the old Satan worshippers, and I mean that's classic Tom Baker era.
I was going to say that exactly. It harkened back to classic Tom Baker, which is why I liked it as much as I did. And of course, I love Liz Sladen anyway. So.
Right. So that was.
But anyway, Sidecar.
Yes. And So I guess
So he did two decent things. I liked Black Orchid a lot, and Canine and Company, I thought is a very underrated, misunderstood
and
show.
anybody who worked on Blake 7 is my hero. So
I have to agree on that. Yeah, I love Blake Seven.
that's yeah.
So, but some of his other Doctor Who stuff a little questionable. So he's inconsistent.
But he's in
Although
the.
Doomwatch, I gotta admit, I think is
I thought that was
pretty good.
this was a fascinating episode. The premise is frightening. The pacing in the story is a little weird with the kind
It's 1970s.
in and out of the discussions about her sexuality and the moralizing about the nature of scientific research and whatnot. But
Well, that whole bit, I think a lot of it really, truly, it really was just a reflection of the times. I mean, we've seen that. We've commented on that on UFO. Unfortunately, we've commented on some of the more negative aspects of that in Man from Atlantis. So it's not uncommon to see a TV show really make some kind of a commentary of sorts, at least in tone, to the culture of the day. So
or the culture
I'm not
of writers anyway.
yeah. So I'm not entirely surprised that the episode took that turn. I found it amusing in a somewhat historical sense, but I don't think it necessarily took away from the show. Maybe it's because I'm old enough to remember TV shows back then.
Yeah. So I'll be remembering it when I see Rise of the Planet of the Apes
Oh dear God!
on Netflix someday.
Yeah, 50 years from now, with any luck.
But it actually doesn't look that bad. I mean, it doesn't look like Planet of the Apes, but
I'm not going to watch it. If I want to watch Planet of the Apes, I'm going to pop in Doomwatch instead, because I think it did it. I think in terms of that whole Frankenstein story, I really like this one. Granted, I'm not a big fan of Let's Beat Up Mary Shelley for what she did. Very much opposed to that. But if you just want to take the classic monster. Okay, what's so funny?
I'm the one who wants to beat up Mary Shelley. I'm still mad at her about this. I mean,
Because of the reaction?
It's a classic story, but it is so in that period of time, Shelley and Byron and Keats and that era of what is the phrase about science destroyed the rainbow or unweaved the rainbow or something of that nature. There's that in a period of the Enlightenment, there was an artistic flowering against it in terms of, this is not true knowledge. This is not the important knowledge that you can glean in existence. There's the stuff you get from too much absinthe and drugs and flitting around by lakesides and things, which is what Keats and Byron represent. And so very much hippie culture of the 70s, 60s, and 70s. But so the portrayal of Frankenstein is too over the top, in my opinion. He's made far, far too amoral to be a realistic character. And that cliche has been stamped on everything ever since. And for that, I hold Mary Shelley responsible. It's not her fault that it's been stamped. It was a very compelling story in its time and for the audience. And, it cinematically, it's been in the theaters, on stage.
Well, I think what I meant to say is I'm not going to take that position where I'm going to become the anti-scientist. That's what I meant. And be the one who beats up Mary Shelley for representing all science. That's pretty much what I was trying to get across.
So we sound like we agree that this is a recommendation.
Absolutely. I mean, so we've had 2 Doomwatch episodes so far, and both of them I thought were winners.
Show's on its way to becoming a classic television show, unless they blow it. I'm not saying one way or the other, but
Well, you have the advantage of having seen the rest of the series, at least what's available.
And that's why I'm not saying. That's why I'm not saying. But I did pick Doomwatch for a reason. For the show.
Well, we needed a British show.
And because not many people in this country have ever seen it. And when I say this country, I mean over here. Because obviously podcasts know no borders. They know no boundaries.
Well, my friends who live in England, even those who are a number of years younger than the both of us, when they heard us do a podcast on the first one, and some of them contacted me and started rattling off all sorts of facts and figures about Doomwatch. So it even they know about it.
Well, fair enough. It's was a famous show. Well, I guess that's all we have time for this evening, and I hope once again I'll invite you all to come to our forums at fusionpatrol.com and forum away. Not Roman forums, that's discussion forums. No Roman foruming at our forums. It's really not designed for that. And you can contact us, feedback at fusionpatrol.com, Facebook, look for Fusion Patrol, Twitter, Fusion Patrol. And until next time, sayonara. Got caught in that again, didn't I? Just can't quite know where to finish that. So
No, you don't quite have the sign off.
I'll just say arrivederci.
Cheers.
You've been listening to the Fusion Patrol podcast, a production of Lone Locust Productions. Join us on our new discussion forums at fusionpatrol.com. Find us on Facebook or follow us on Twitter. Username Fusion Patrol. You can also send us feedback by email at feedback@fusionpatrol.com. If you'd like to support Fusion Patrol, please leave us a review on iTunes. Fusion Patrol's theme music is Fight the Future by Amberwolf.
Arrivederci?